The Darien Scheme, a time when Scottish folk thought they'd build an empire by selling wool to other folk living on the equator, and then quickly realized that colonies need more than just the worst plan you could think of. Hello, you beautiful ladies and gentle ladies. I am the English-accented AI voice, which is currently in control of the Scotsman known as Ancient Swan. You probably don't know me, and that's okay, but stay here and you will do soon enough. And today we will be discovering all about Scotland's attempt at becoming something much bigger. How it started, how it went, and why it is that 300 years later, a significant amount of Scots wish that everyone had just stayed home instead. Now, strap yourselves in, because we're about to fall into the disastrous saga that is the Darien Scheme. Picture it. Scotland. The late 17th century, a time of kilts, bagpipes, castles, and angry little haggis running amok. But amidst the misty moors and rugged landscapes, a group of Scots decided they were tired of tartan and they wanted a taste of the exotic. And who wouldn't? I live in Scotland and look out the window now. You know what I see? Clouds. You know what I saw yesterday? Clouds. Day before that? Clouds. I've just checked my phone. Guess what's tomorrow? Correct, clouds. And what could be more exotic than a tropical paradise? The fact that this particular tropical paradise, known even today as one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, still filled with deadly snakes, disease-ridden swamps, and more than enough mosquitoes to fill a sandwich, was the tropical paradise Scotland chose to place. Its colony is not a moot point, as we will come to learn. Welcome to the Darien Scheme. An unsuccessful attempt backed by the Kingdom of Scotland to gain wealth and power by establishing a colony on the east coast of Panama. Now, where did this wonderful idea come from? Well, it came from one of the world's first banker wankers, a man named William Paterson. Paterson was no slouch. He co-founded the Bank of England in 1694. This was a man who had made his fortune in West Indies trade, including the slave trade, and rubbed shoulders with buccaneers. So yes, his resume was equal parts finance and piracy. While in the Caribbean, being all rich and piratey and stuff, Paterson had gotten the idea to build a Scottish colony on the Isthmus of Panama, creating a shortcut for global trade between the Atlantic and Pacific. And if you know absolutely nothing about the area, this would indeed seem a damn fine idea. So Paterson pitched the plan to England, the Dutch, the Holy Roman Empire, and even Brandenburg. All said no. Scotland, however, said aye. Pleased to have found such great investors, Paterson helped launch the Company of Scotland Trading to Africa and the Indies, which is a mouthful of a company name, but still wasn't his worst idea. Paterson sold Darien as a tropical paradise ripe for Scottish greatness. He convinced thousands of Scots to invest roughly £500,000 in ye olden times money, nearly half the nation's liquid capital. That's about £120 million today, and when looked at it that way, it's almost a bargain. And so the story was set. We Scottish folk in wee Scottish boats would sail across the wee Atlantic Ocean, look the already living there for thousands of years, natives dead in the eye, and then steal a wee bit of their land so that the Scots could call it their own. Ah, colonialism, what wonderful times they must have been. Scotland's new city in far-flung lands would be called New Edinburgh, and it was to be founded in an area known as the Gulf of Darien, the plan being for the colony to establish and manage an overland route to connect the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. A great plan, right? It is, actually, if you know nothing about the Darien. This was a time before the Panama Canal, and control over that narrow stretch of land between the oceans would have netted Scotland a tidy sum. Unfortunately, though, Scottish people living in the 17th century did not know the things that Scottish people living on the internet know today. They did not know about the Darien Gap. You see, ladies and gentlemen, even today, like now at this moment, not yesterday, then too obviously, but also today, the Darien Gap is still known as perhaps the least hospitable place on Earth. Not counting, obviously, bits of planet Earth underwater, or inside volcanoes, or sitting next to my mother-in-law when she finds out what I did with the money. Do you know geography? Here's a map. The blue bits are water. It's a map of the Americas. The big bit in the north is North America, and the big pointy bit in the south is East Germany. You see that tiny narrow bit of land where the two big bits connect? That's the Darien Gap. Total rainforest. Air there is made up of damp and flying protein. You dare not breathe because of the mosquitoes. You cannot breathe because of humidity. So no need to worry about the mosquitoes. And also, don't touch the snakes. Do not even look at a frog. Lick things at your own peril. Even today, and I'm not lying, there are no roads that connect South and North America. And I quote the gods of Wikipedia, there is no road, not even a primitive one, across the Darien Gap. Colombia and Panama are the only countries in the Americas that share a land border but lack even a rudimentary link. Even today, the land is so determined to kill you that even the road workers are just like, nah. This is where Scotland put all its money and hopes, where dreams go to die and laughter is the only currency worth anything. You see, my friend, the Scots have a thing for adventure. I myself have been on many a trip, some of them to real far-out places, and the Scots have figured out that if we are going to fail spectacularly, we might as well do it in style. So, armed with nothing but optimism and a few barrels of Scotch whisky, they set sail for the New World, ready to conquer a land that didn't even want them in the first place. Now, I must say, that's actually not true. The colonists definitely took more than just optimism and whisky. They actually took quite many other things with them, including many things for trade with the locals once they arrived, thinking what a great idea it will be to sell and trade with the people already there, a surefire way to success. How could the local people not love what we've got for them? We'll be heroes. Scotland took wool, and other stuff too, of course, but like wool. You see, these hardy pioneers had spent their entire lives wrapped in wool purely just to get through the Scottish summer, and had absolutely zero comprehension of the climate where they were going, taking wool to sell and make clothes for people who were already half naked for a very good reason. Wool melts in the rainforest. That's a true fact. Do your research. But anyway, before they could even set foot on the sandy shores of Panama, disaster struck. Turns out exploring the depths of the Atlantic in the 17th century was about as safe as exploring the deep web today, or so I've been told. Disease ran rampant through the cramped quarters of the ships, claiming more lives than a particularly brutal Saturday night in Glasgow. And let's not forget the storms. Oh, the storms. It was like Mother Nature had a personal vendetta against the Scots, and she wasn't about to let them off easy. But did our intrepid adventurers let a little thing like impending doom stop them? Of course not. They sailed on, fueled by sheer stubbornness and the promise of riches beyond their wildest dreams. And so they arrived in Panama, ready to stake their claim on the land and make their mark on history. Too bad history had other plans. The first 1,200 settlers arrived in November 1698, and it very quickly becomes clear that this colony could not sustain itself. Mismanagement? Yes. Infighting? Double yes. You see, building a colony from scratch is no easy feat, especially when you're up against hostile natives, sweltering heat, and a distinct lack of basic survival skills. But did that stop the brave travellers from trying? No, of course it didn't. But you see, Scottish people are not meant for hot weather. I know this because I am one, and I've been hot, was not a fan, did not do well. So by March 1699, and only 4 months into their adventure, 270 people were already dead. The death rate was now at 10 per day. 5 ships were sent out to nearby colonies to find help. 4 of them returned with nothing except for a message. It was now that the intrepid Scottish pioneers found out that their best friends in the whole world forever and ever, the English, had placed a trade embargo on the colony. By order of the king, nobody was allowed to help the Scottish colony. Nobody was allowed to trade with the colony. It was illegal to send help, and double illegal to send supplies, by punishment of a lifetime spent in a cellar, and then also probably some death. I'm not bitter, it's fine. And let's not forget about the Spanish, who were less than thrilled about a bunch of Scotsmen traipsing around their backyard, sticking flags in the ground and acting like that land had belonged to them all along. You see, before the Scots had arrived, the Spanish had already been there many times and had already settled many of their own colonies in the New World. They didn't need some Egypts turning up and disrupting their sea of red blobs with an annoying wee blue blob. And then, because the Spanish were such an important power at the time, the Dutch also then refused to trade. Through fear of upsetting the Spanish, the colonists were all on their own, no help and no food. It was like a truly awful episode of Survivor. Only with more whiskey and less Bear Grylls, because he wasn't born yet. The constant rubbish whiskey jokes are not me just being an idiot. I'm serious. At this stage, there was not much left to pay people for their work. The food was gone. Money was a concept. Alcohol was the only reward left to give. Done some work, here's some whiskey. Built something, here's some whiskey. Caught some fish? Excellent, wash it down with this whiskey. Chased a Spanish man away? That's double whiskey rewards for you. People got drunk a lot. If you've ever been drunk in a hellishly hot place, you'll know how bad it can be. Who needs dehydration when you can have dehydration plus with double extreme shitting your own pants and for only half the dosage? To make things worse, the settlers found out that the Spanish were planning to attack, and so, knowing that they were weak and could not hold off the Spanish army, they all packed up their suitcases and left, abandoning the colony to the Spanish. Adios, amigos! Of the 4 ships who set sail for a return to Scotland, 3 of them were lost at sea with no survivors. Only one of them made it home, with 300 lucky souls happy to see dry land again, although, of course, this was Scotland, so they'd probably be seeing wet land. But still, you get the point. They were happy to be home and off the boats. Of the 1,200 people who had left for a new life the year before, 3/4 of them were now dead. So far, and yes, I did say so far, because it's not over yet, because very unfortunately, whilst the first group of colonists were sailing home and unbeknownst to them, a second group of hopeful Scots was already on its way over to Panama. Now, before we continue into the unluck that became the second bunch, I am obliged to remind you that if you have enjoyed anything today, and aren't at all driven mad by the rubbish I continue to speak, please do like and subscribe. There's a rumor going around that it helps the algorithm, and as we all know, every rumor is 100% true, so do that, thank you. Now, back to the story, because as I just mentioned, as one group of Scots were thinking, bollocks to this, I'm going home, a second group of Scots were already on their way out to join the party. In December 1699, 1,300 more people arrived and found a ghost town. Unperturbed by a distinct disappearance of white people pissing sweat, the second group got stuck in, pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and got right on with it, for a very short while. The second group were plagued by the same disease and malnutrition as the first group. The natives were also still not impressed by the wool stuff. However, this second group were a bit more prepared for an ass-kicking than the first group. This time, when they found out about Spanish plans for domination, they took the initiative. They didn't hang around and wait to be attacked. The Scots opted for a preemptive strike. They attacked the nearby Spanish fort and were successful, driving out the Spanish army. This, as it turns out, was to be an independent Scotland's last ever military victory. Despite taking names and handing out beatings, the colonists were now left even weaker. The Spanish returned not long after and blockaded the colony. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. And that's when things got worse. So, after just 1 month, the newly arrived Scots were forced to give up and return home. The Darien Scheme had a 71% death rate. As the Company of Scotland, which had funded the venture, was backed by approximately 20% of all the money circulating in Scotland at that time, its failure left the Scottish economy in absolute ruin. Scotland was bankrupt. The Darien Scheme, its failure, and the country's now lack of pennies, is seen as one of the main reasons that the British flag is by far and away the most coolest flag of any country today, which is a fact, so don't bother arguing. The reason being that Scotland's newfound empty purse is one of the main reasons for its agreeing to the 1707 Act of Union when Scotland became one with England, and everything has been fine ever since. If not for its absolute failure, it's very likely that Scotland would have remained an independent country to this day, saving me a lot of bother, and so despite their best efforts, the Darien Scheme was doomed from the start. The colony collapsed faster than a soggy shortbread, leaving behind nothing but a trail of broken dreams and empty bottles of Glenmorangie. As the Scots licked their wounds and sailed back home, they couldn't help but wonder, was it all worth it? The answer, my friends, is blowing in the wind, and also no, the answer is no, it was not worth it. So here's to the brave souls of the Darien Scheme, whose grand ambitions were matched only by their spectacular failure. May their legacy live on as a cautionary tale for generations to come. Never trust a pasty white man selling wool in 39-degree heat, the best laid schemes of mice and men and all that jazz. And so, fine ladies and gentle ladies, it's time to ask ourselves, what have we learned today? For me, I've learned that if my ancestors had bothered their ass to do some research first, then maybe I'd be less angry at British politics today. Or maybe I wouldn't, I'd probably just be angry at some wanker in Edinburgh instead. And so I've also learned to do your goddamned research. I mean, what absolute shit for brains decided it would be a good idea to set up camp in the Darien? Even today, it's a part of planet Earth that people avoid like the plague, because it is literally filled with plague. New Edinburgh and the Darien Scheme was Scotland's 17th century attempt at colonial greatness that ended with tropical dysentery, Spanish hostility, English overlordship, and a national financial implosion. It's basically the historical equivalent of investing your life savings in a crypto coin called Panama Gold 420 because your cousin swears it's going to the moon. And so I've also learned not to invest so much in such high-risk gambles. Sure, it pays off sometimes, and for those lucky few when it does, then they get to be super rich and make the rest of us feel like shit. But the chances of this happening are 1 million to 1, and I reckon I'd rather keep my pennies and invest in something a bit safer instead. If the ultimate punishments for my investments failure is that one day I get to be lorded over by Boris fucking Johnson, then I say that sometimes it's safer to just not try. I think I've learned that tropical colonies require more than kilts and optimism. If your plan involves some time spent in the literal rainforest, then perhaps wool is not the best thing to take. I know this seems obvious to us all today, but couldn't it have also been at least a little bit obvious to folk back then as well? Apparently not. These people landed in Panama with wool clothing, zero immunity to tropical diseases, and the strategic foresight of a non-educated delinquent. And if you are going to ignore all the signs, try not to do it whilst also pissing off one of the world's superpowers. Spain was indeed a superpower at the time, and the Scots basically just turned up and tried to colonize their back garden. That would be like me turning up to the United States today and claiming Staten Island as my own. I don't think that would go down too well. Do you? You don't get to park your car across the local drug king's driveway and expect it to still be there in the morning. And, as always, never ever, ever trust a banker, ever. Because bankers are wankers, and more than 300 years later I'm still living the fallout. Anyway, folks, fallout or not, it's time to depart. But not before we quickly thank Planet Earth's greatest Patreons, those being DD, George H., David R., Thad S., Malichi I., Stephen, and Anthony T. Thank you so much for your continued support. And also, don't forget the liking and subscribing part. It helps keep my wife off my back. And also, every time you don't do it, a wee part of my soul dies. Right then. Bye for now, and see you next time. I'm out. Have a great day. Peace, love, and chips. Goodbye.